All right, it's 5:15, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is the July 18th meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Zoning present here this evening are Allison Grass, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Chappie McKay. Mr. Goodwin apparently will be attending, but he'll be a little bit tardy. And me, your chair, Jeff Tibbles. Present from the planning staff are Lee Batchelder, Penny Ashby, and Emma McClory. And Ellison Craig. Thank you, Lee. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak please identify yourself for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with condition, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Pursuant to our ordinance, I'm required to swear in anyone who is intending to speak this evening. So if you do intend to speak, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll signify by saying, I do. Thank you. We don't have any deferrals tonight on the agenda, so we'll proceed with Section A of the agenda, review of minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. We're stretching way back to review the minutes of the May 16, 2023 board meeting. We do have a quorum present to approve those minutes this evening, and the members who were in attendance on May 16th were Robin Richards, Chappie McKay, John Bennett, and me, who are here this evening. So do I hear a motion? Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes and the minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is A2, review of the minutes of the June 20th, 2023 board meeting. And we did have full attendance at that meeting, so we do have a quorum that's present and available to vote on the approval of these minutes. Do I have a motion? Mr. Mr. McKay moves to approve. Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The minutes are approved unanimously. The next item on our agenda. We now move to Section B of the agenda, new applications. Number 1 under section B is 111 Ashley Boulevard, Charlestown. TMS number 457-11-01-039, requesting the fourth one-year extension of a vested right that expires on June 5th, 2023, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right is an approved variance under section 54-353 for attached dwelling units, duplexes, in an STR, single two-family residential zone district. The owner is Barnes Moultrie Ward, LLC. The applicant is Neil Stevenson Architects, Terra Romano. Mr. Batchelder.
We recommend approval of the extension. We did receive the application for the extension prior to the vested right expiration on June 5th, so it met that requirement. And there's been no change that would prevent us from granting the extension, so we recommend.
All right, do I hear a motion? All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Do I have a second? Ms. Richards seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The extension of the vested rights is approved. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The next item on our agenda, B2, 1593 Langston Drive, Island Estates, TMS number 279-10-00-011, zoned SR1, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story addition, kitchen, dining room expansion that extends a non-conforming 6.2-foot south side setback. 9 feet are required. The owner applicant is Gene Arthur Gibbs. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a home on Johns Island, a neighborhood that dates the current zoning rules, and so the 9-foot side setback applies to this particular side of the lot. Was not there when the house was built, and what they would like to do is construct a rear addition that extends the non-conforming 6.2-foot side setback on the narrow side yard property. Here you see the house, and this is the site plan showing that the addition. So here's the addition back here, and extending that non-conforming side setback of 6.2 feet, and the extension is the length of this extension is 12 feet. And just a one-story addition to expand the kitchen dining area. And these plans here. So this is the side view proposed addition. And there's a letter from the immediate neighbor on that side indicating that they have no objections or concerns. And so we think it meets the special exception requirements to allow the extension. So we recommend approval.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application for 1593 Langston Drive? If you're in opposition to the application, please raise your hand. All right, I see no one in here in opposition. Do we have the owner applicant here? Yes, sir. Anything you'd like to say to the board? Thank you. Any discussion, any questions for Lee? Do I have a motion? All right, Ms. Richards moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and your special exception for 1593 Langston Drive is approved. Thank you, sir. The next item on our agenda is B3 for 59 Gibb Street, Charlestown, TMS number 457-11-01-051, zoned STR, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow an elevated one-story addition, garage, office, guest room, family room expansion with a 3-foot east side setback, a 4.5-foot total side setback, 6 feet and 18 feet are required. The owners are Jennings and Ross Cameron. The applicant is Laura F. Altman, LFA Architecture. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a home in the Charleston neighborhood on Peninsula. And see the zoning map here showing its location. The wider side yard is actually on the east side of this lot. And the zoning on the property contemplates the wider side yard being on the west side. So for whatever reason, the house predates the zoning, so, but that's just the way they built it back then. And so here's an aerial view, and the applicant has submitted their argument for the variance. So here you see on the left the existing site plan. There's a driveway that runs down that east side of the lot, and then a very narrow side yard on the other side of the lot. And you see very faintly the dashed lines indicating the required building setbacks off of each side. And then on the right is the proposed site plan showing the addition to the side of the house that would encroach to the required 3-foot side yard setback, or 6-foot side yard setback. And it would leave a 3-foot setback off of that east side property line. So here's the blow up of that. Again, you see proposed addition that's a little over 12 feet wide, and 31 feet long approximately. And would be a garage on the ground level, and then one floor above. And on the lower right, you see a image of what that would look like. So they would be expanding the rooms on the first floor of the house with this addition. And below, or on the top view, you see the sister house of this at 57 Gibbs Street. And it has a similar addition to the side, east side, with the garage on the ground level and one-story addition space above. That's been there for a number of years. That predates the Google Street images that go back to 2007. So not sure exactly when it was built, but at some point, probably after the original house was constructed, that was added to it. That's similar to what's being proposed here. So, of course, this will have to go through the BAR. If you approve it, be approved by the BAR as well. And they may have their own concerns about this addition, but from our standpoint, it's purely an issue of a setback variance encroachment and setback encroachment, which requires the variance. And on the second or the first floor, you see the expanded family room right here, and little office guest room over here. That would be what would, in addition, would add those spaces to the existing house. They have a porch on the front, and they have a porch on the back, so constructing a rear addition would greatly impact their existing home and porch that exists on the back of the house with a small backyard. So, and top floor attic. These are different views showing the proposed addition. So on the left, the lower left is the front view. On the lower right is the view from the back of the house. elevations shown here. So it's set back, well back from the street. Views, and so the applicant was able to provide some letters from neighbors who have no objections with their indications here, including the neighbor, the immediate neighbor at 57 Gibb Street, that owner sign indicating that they have no objection. That's the house on the side where the addition is proposed. And there's another letter from folks at 59 Gibbs. Then we also have a letter that just came in from the owners of 61 Gibbs as well. There is a letter in opposition from Catherine Carroll of the Preservation Society, and they're indicating that they side additions are contrary to the traditional linear development patterns in Charleston, not reflective of the prevailing character of the streetscape. And they make the point that this property is very similar in size. The majority in the area, they don't feel that there are extraordinary exceptional conditions. So they are objecting to the not supportive of this variance request. So that was the one letter and comment that we received in opposition to this. Otherwise, we're not aware of any other objections or concerns from neighbors. And our recommendation is for approval. I think if you look at the map, going back to the beginning, there are homes, number of homes actually, that have existing footprints that come close to matching the width of the lot, or have additions to the side of the homes that come close to the other side property line. So it's not uncommon for these homes in this area of the city to have very narrow side yards, and with the limited height and this setback of the addition from the street, from the front of the house, I think it minimizes the impact. The neighbor on that immediate side at 57 Gibbs indicates that they have no objection to this. They're the most immediately impacted neighbors. So for those reasons, I'm going to recommend approval of the application.
All right, thank you, Lee. I have a question about this one, but I'll come back to it. Anybody here in opposition to the variance request for 59 Gibb Street? All right, do we have the owner or applicant here? All right. If you'd like to present, go ahead. But and maybe before you present, I have a question that may be best answered by Lee. Why would this not be a special exception? Is the property not in a non-conforming state to begin with because of the failure to meet the 18-foot total side setbacks and therefore extension of the non-conforming condition?
Well, with regard to the side yard on the east side of this lot, where the addition is proposed, the house is conforming. So there is no non-conforming side setback that would be extended with this addition. What is instead, the addition is actually adding to that side of the house by encroaching into required side yard setback.
What's the 18-foot total side setback? What does that mean?
That has to do with the total of this east side setback, which will be 3 feet, and the west side setback of the existing house, which is actually 1.5 feet. So it's a total of 4.5 feet.
And that was my question. Is it not in a non-conforming condition with respect to the total side setback?
It is, but the total side setback is much wider or larger right now. And it'll be shrinking, so that in that instance, we view that as a variance.
Okay. All right, Ms. Altman.
Thank you. My name is Laura Altman, OFA Architecture. I'm representing Jennings and Ross Cameron at 59 Gibbs. Thank you, Mr. Batchelder, for your presentation because it did cover several of my points, and we'll try not to repeat anything. This is a forever house for my clients. They had a young family. They've got 2 small children and 2 dogs. So gaining some additional living space was critical for this family, as well as some additional storage and parking space, hence the garage at the ground level. The house was built in 1925 by the LaRoche family. Jennings, my client, is a preservationist at heart and was really excited to be contacted by the family, so she's been in communication. We've learned a little bit more about the house. The rear porches were enclosed in the 1940s, mid-40s, and then later new porches were added, but we don't know the date of those. Those were recently restored by my client as a previous project separately. And as we mentioned, there's a sister house at 57 Gibbs. That was also built around the same time, and according to the Sanborn maps, there was originally a 2-story porch on that house, but that was either lost over time or changed significantly when that family did an addition, and that was about 15 to 17 years ago, according to the people who lived there prior to the current owners. And it's elevated to meet the current flood code. So you go in that house and have to go up a couple of steps to that addition. So we're requesting the variance to allow this 3-foot side setback, again, to create some living space at that main level for this family, a larger family room. And we've looked to 57 Gibbs as a precedent, this addition is similar to that addition on the side where they have a garage also, but smaller than that addition. Ours is only 1 story. That one has a 2nd floor towards the rear of the property. And we kept just a low slope roof and a roof garden like on the other house. We are maintaining the existing floor level at the house so that it feels continuous with the rest of the house, which does require us to slope down a little bit into the garage to get the required head height that we need there. And the addition is just wide enough to accommodate a car so that we maintain our 2 parking spaces on site. So we're not creating an addition that's any wider or taller than it has to be. And again, our goal was just to create the most sensitive addition to an historic home. It's set back from that front corner of the house. It's not interfering with the 2nd floor windows. We did study pushing the addition back a little farther, but to me, that was less sensitive to the historic property because we would then be encapsulating that original southeast corner of the house and kind of losing that evolution. And as Lee mentioned, we can't add on to the rear. The house is already overstepping the setbacks at the front, rear, and west side. And then, of course, the family needs that porch space, so that's not a space to really take over. It's good living space. They need space in the backyard for kids to play and dogs to play, that sort of thing. As Lee mentioned, we're not aware of any opposition from the neighbors either. We provided the letters. I did meet with the Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society so to understand NFF's concerns, which is why I studied pushing that addition further back to see if that would help their concerns. And I think that's all. I provided the variance test, so if there's anything else, any questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
Ms. Grass.
Can you just explain what the hardship is, please?
Yes. So in looking at going through my variance test, first of all, this was built prior to the application of the zoning code. So even when the zoning code was just overlaid for this area, it required that 18-foot total setback. And as it is existing, even without an addition, it's only 16.5 feet. These houses in this area were not built as very long, narrow Charleston single houses, which would have been more appropriate for that, zoning overlay. As Leah mentioned, most of the lots in this area are similar width, and the buildings take up nearly all of their lot width. They're designed as more of a craftsman style or Victorian, where they have wider fronts to them, more box-like rather than the long narrow Charleston single house. And the lots in the area that do have side yards that actually meet the side setbacks seem to be double or triple lots. Does that answer your question? I also have, sorry, I gotta look at my notes. As I mentioned, the house is already overstepping, and so the only way to add on was to go in this direction, to the east. And the addition, if we met the side setback, would be 9 feet, 9'2", which would not be wide enough to allow the car to drive in. So we're matching the width of the existing driveway.
Any follow-up questions or questions for Ms. Sullivan? Questions for Lee?
So I had some of that. I'm a little curious how you'll address sort of the bathtub effect of having a garage that's a lower down.
There's going to be a challenge for sure, but I will work through that with the contractor and our engineers, of course. Well, we will definitely need a sump pump this area. I mean, even on a regular storm, there's some puddling in that driveway. So there will be a sump pump, there'll be a trench drain at the entrance. I'm also going to work to grade it a little bit so that as the flat part of the driveway, so that we're not sending all the water in, but all that towards the street. So that we're only taking on the water that's coming straight down. Even though there's all that kind of stuff to just have a water management.
Any further questions? All right, is there a motion?
Motion for approval.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bennett seconds the motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. McKay? Aye.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Richards?
Aye.
All right, Ms. Grass? And mine is a no, so the motion fails and the variance is not granted for 59 Gibb Street. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B4, 51 Watru Point, Daniel Island, TMS number 271-11-01-107, zone DI-R, requesting a variance from section 54-263, Daniel Island PUD Master Plan zoning regulations to allow a 12 square foot porch addition encroachment into the 20-foot visual buffer zone. The owner is Willie Pest. The applicant is Joel Adrian, Studio 291 LLC. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a home on Daniel Island. Here you see the zoning map, that this is a peninsula of land on the west side of the island. And the lot is a triangular shaped lot. Here is an aerial view. You see the critical area and the creek behind the house. Let's make their application out there. Reasons why they think the area test has been met. Here's a survey showing the existing home on the lot with the existing critical line. And the house was built a number of years ago. And since that time, the critical line has shifted into the lot, in most cases, most areas. So in this particular area where this addition is proposed, which is right back here, the critical line has shifted quite a bit, as you see in this yellow highlighted area right here. And so that has pushed this visual buffer zone, which is a 25-foot wide, 20-foot wide visual buffer zone, closer to the house. And let's see. So here we have a site plan with the proposed porch addition. And I've highlighted the area that encroaches into that visual buffer zone with that new critical line drawn here. If the critical line had not shifted, this addition would not be within that visual buffer zone. Sorry, excuse me. So the area of this encroachment is 12 square feet, and the porch extends 2 feet into the visual buffer zone, and it's about 9 feet wide, but it has a odd shape to it. Anyway, it's not 18 square feet. But that is the request, and more information here, detail about what's being proposed. The elevations, existing, proposed. So here you see the proposed porch addition. Talked about just this edge. So that's the application. The applicant originally came before the board some months ago with an application for a larger addition off the back. It had a porch that kind of ran across the back of the house with a pool in it.
Is this the same property?
Yes. And that one was denied. I didn't support that. I think that was a bit much for an encroachment in the visual buffer zone. So I did not support that. The board denied it. So this is their revised request, downsizing the addition that they're proposing, putting the pool in ground and not in the setback or the visual buffer zone. And the only issue is this slight encroachment over here. You see how they're trying to build something that's usable off the back of the house. That's enough area. So they have downsized their request considerably. The visual buffer zone on Union Island was particular to that island, and it was part of the original zoning for the island to preserve the vegetation, natural vegetation around the edge of the island. I don't think this compromises that. This slight encroachment, I think the shape of the critical line and the impact that creates on the property leads to the hardship that's being requested. So I think this is a reasonable request, and they've met the requirements for the variance, and my recommendation is for approval. And I do know that the Daniel Allen ARB said that they would be supportive of this as well. They have a series of conditions and things like that have to do with design, but as to the encroachment, they're supportive of it. So we're not aware of any objections or concerns. I think the applicant even had a letter of support for the previous application from an adjacent neighbor for the application that was turned down. So So we recommend approval of this.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone here in opposition to the application for 51 Waterproof 1? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Adrian, come on up. Tell us what you got.
Thank you, Joel Adrian, Division 1, Dyer, the addition of the porch and pool. The is presented well. We did contract with back in March, and pool was pushing into that 20-foot buffer, as was the porch. The porch was simply a rectangle that I was putting off that master. The purpose of needing the porch currently in this house, probably the only house on Daniel Island that does not have a covered porch on the back of the house. And so there's no way for the owners to get outside and not just dehydrate in the weather that we have in the summer. So they asked to try to get this addition off the back. We modified it so that it's actually, I think it's more successful than the previous application, so thank you for buying that one. The architecture actually complements the back of the house better with the base structure for the porch, the shape, matching that of the breakfast area. It is just that little sliver, and I thought that little sliver was 1.5 feet by.
Oh, foot and a half.
That's the size. But, we also were planning on putting gutters. The buffer was there to protect the vegetation, so we're going to gutter this, and the downspout would be in compliance with that 20-foot additional buffer. So the water that's actually pushed out would have the full filtration of that buffer before getting into actual treatment. But Daniel Island did review it, did support it. They wanted to see another elevation. Wanted to draw the left side elevation. Can't see the porch from the left side elevation, but I'll draw that for them. And the neighbor adjacent to, if you're standing in the front looking at the house, and the neighbor to the left supported the application, asked him 4 or 5 conditions, and my client's still fine with all 5 of those conditions. So there's no opposition from the neighbor. There's no neighbor to the right until you get 75 or 100 feet down the road. I'll take any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Mr. Adrian. Does anybody have any questions for Bill or for the city? Yes, Ms. Kratz.
So just to clarify, the owner will not be landscaping in that buffer area at all? In the buffer area at all?
No, the landscaping was requested by the adjacent neighbor over on that side of his property to increase the visual buffer to separate his house from Mr. Best's house. But there's no planned landscape unless Daniel Island tells us we need to landscape in the buffer. We don't plan on landscaping.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Adrian or for the city?
I just want to thank Joe. That's great to go back, work it out. The buffers and wetlands mean something. I remember the case vividly. And so commend you and the homeowner for being willing to revise it and work within it, because wetlands are precious.
Lee, I have a question. I seem to remember, did we have 2 applications? One maybe on James Island where they were requesting a variance from the buffer, or was this the only property that we dealt with on this issue?
I think this is the only one. I don't recall one on James Island.
Okay.
I think we've got another one on Daniel Island.
It was another one on Daniel Island.
Having to do with the pool,
Right,
and the board condition,
right,
if they condition the encroachment, it will not get any larger, will not be enclosed.
right. That's correct.
And
Okay.
there might have been one in West Ashley.
That's the one I was thinking about. That's what I was thinking about. In general, I don't love building things in setback buffer, however, pretty minor intrusion, so. Anybody else have questions, thoughts?
What does that look like? I'm curious about the idea of sort of pitching back close to construction, but I think you probably have already looked at that exercise and don't have any room to do the other porch at that point.
Yeah, so initially when it was the rectangle, we used the furniture out there and sit and enjoy the scene. And by putting the angle to it, then
I'll move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. And the variance for 51 Wattrue Point is granted. Thank you, Mr. Agia. Next item on our agenda is B5, 40 Boyer Court, East Central, TMS number 463-12-02-02-074, zoned DR-1F, requesting a special exception under section 54-501 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area is 824 square feet, 4,000 square feet are required. Also requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 0-foot front setback, 3-foot rear setback, a 3-foot total front and rear setback, a 3-foot south side setback, and a 6-foot total side setback, and a 64% lot occupancy. 25 feet, 25 feet, 50 feet, 9 feet, 15 feet, and 50% lot occupancy required. The owner is SKAAI LLC. The applicant is John Douglas Tucker, architect. Mr. Batchelder.
So scattered around the peninsula are these courts, and they're all similar in that they have very narrow streets, and they're usually not through streets. They're usually, they go into a block, have lots off of the court, internally in the block, but there's no other means of egress other than that one access point to a main street. And the lots, I think on all of them that I'm thinking of, they're scattered throughout the peninsula, are typically exceptionally small lots, and so they're all challenged from a zoning standpoint with being able to do anything. And this is no different from those other courts. In fact, it may be the most challenged because the main street coming off of Omni, you can see it's fairly wide. The street going back, straight back, and this court, Boyer Court, is located right the off ramp from Interstate 26. If you're heading north, taking that Romney Street exit, you come off, you're practically facing this court. But you see it's wide where you drive into the block. Then there are these two really, really narrow extensions of the court that provide access, the only means of access to some of these properties back here. So it's very unusual in that respect, because most of the courts have streets that are at least, I think, typically 10 or 12 feet wide. Those two little streets are maybe even narrower than that. And but this lot that we're dealing with, I think, is it's the smallest lot on the court. It's right back here. And our zoning overlay layer is a little bit off justification, so it doesn't quite line up with the property lines, the color for that zoning district. Otherwise, it should all be shaded DR1F. But that's the location of the lot. It's vacant. There's no house on it. You see that lot next door, which has a house on it that occupies practically the entire lot. So that's, and then you see the other homes, the footprints of other homes, those lots that are quite large relative to the small lot size. This lot, and the first request has to do with building a home on a lot of insufficient size. The zoning requires a minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet. And this lot is only 824 square feet in size. So it's exceptionally small, and there's no way to build a home on it without obtaining setback variances. But these lots were intended to have homes on them, and at one time it might very well have had a home on it. So here's an aerial view showing the conditions today. And see this, some of these homes are new. This one over here along the interstate is new, fairly new. And this one looks to be new. Some of these are probably older, have had some additions to them. This one I know is a new home constructed about within the last 10 years right here. And we've approved another one on what is shown here as a vacant lot. But I think it may be built today, I'm not sure. So well, that's some of the existing conditions. And there's the applicant's information. So back in June 22nd, 2023, is that right? When was that? 2022? Oh, that's the BAR. Okay, the BAR, right. So they approved a new single family home with an additional half story with some conditions. And that has to do with the height of this house. And here you see some images from the street level. There's the lot in question. This is the lot in question. This is the home on that adjoining lot. This is the little extension Boyer Court right off of the main section. So you see how narrow that is. More images. And yes, here is the Sanborn map. So this shows that there was a house on that lot years ago. It was lost somewhere along the way, but it's been vacant for a number of years. And 1955, it was still there. So here's the lot, the applicant's proposal. So here's the footprint that they're proposing. In order to park on the lot and have a house, you've got to park on the ground floor and put parking underneath the house. So basically that's what they're doing, elevating to meet FEMA requirements and adding a few more feet to be able to park underneath. Good view. So the floor plans show just a nice, small, modest two-bedroom house. Here's this plan is what was approved previously. I don't recall exactly when that was, but that was approved before. This is a similar plan, except that there's parking on site. So they have to elevate the house a little bit more, provide that parking underneath. This plan actually had parking at adjoining adjacent lot, but that's no longer an option. And so they have to put the parking on site. That's how they're proposing to do it. The applicant. And what was before the BAR was the ability to make this a full story, this top floor a full story versus a half story. The BAR, this is in a 2.5 story district, and that elevated first or ground level of the parking counts as a story under our height district rules that we have today. So this was 2 stories plus a full story on top. They automatically were eligible for a half story, but the BAR, under the rules, has the authority to grant the additional half story to make it a full 3-story house. And they did do that. So that is the request that is before you tonight. with these setback, lot occupancy variances, and the special exception to build on a lot of insufficient size. Again, very usually small lot, intended to have a house on it, but it hadn't had a house for a while. And we think this is a very reasonable plan for this lot. We recommend approval.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have any letters of support for?
In the public comments that was sent to you on the Innovate website, there was a comment for support by one of the owners, I believe, that lived across the street. It wasn't submitted to me specifically, it was put on our Innovate site, but there was support for this.
They had a question about the parking, where I didn't understand. I was gonna ask Alta if he knew what their letter meant. Something about the parking
Sure,
arrangement.
and I can publish the comment to the board.
Okay.
This is Andy Barber at 18 Boyer Court. I'm writing to express my favor for the relief requested at 40 Boyer Court, TMS number 463-1202-074. As the residents directly across the street from this proposed structure, I'm in favor of the extra height requested, as it will allow for the occupants of this property to park off-street. Currently, Boyer Court, like many of Charleston's neighborhoods, has a parking issue. Other homes on the street have fenced in their yards that were designed for off-street parking, forcing most everyone on Boyer Court to park on the street. We currently do not have enough spots for the people currently living on Boyer Court and the adjacent Romney Street to park, resulting in blocked streets and poor access for emergency vehicles. My only concern is that the city will need to begin maintaining the end of Boyer Court. There is a road ends sign at the end of the street that is actually about 15 feet before the actual street end. For the proposed plan to work, Boyer Court will need to be extended to the true end of the right-of-way to provide access to the garage spaces. With the other development that has taken place in the immediate vicinity, I see no reason that this relief should be awarded. So I'm not sure if that's in support or.
That was me, it was a typo, sorry.
Okay, all right. So Mr. Barber, you're here? All right.
I was in support.
All right, good. The house that's right next to the lot, and yes, that one, and you had a picture of it a minute ago. Yes, you can see it in the corner right picture. What is the address of that property? Do you have any idea?
Let me see.
While you're thinking
That would
about,
be 42.
is it Boyer Court still?
42 Boyer Court.
Okay. All right, is there anybody here who objects to and wants to speak in opposition to the application at 40 Boyer Court? Here in opposition to 40 Boyer Court. All right, nobody's here in opposition to this application. Do we have the owner and or applicant here? Mr. Tucker? Okay, you want to come on up? I mean, you don't have to present if you don't like. It's your choice.
I'll just add,
Okay.
I mean, Lee did obviously a very good job. I'll just say that one issue that's unusual is, I've never done this before, but we actually went to BAR first just 2 weeks ago. And I know it was a mouthful what we're requesting, because it's a tiny lot, with the special exceptions and the variances. We're not here for for parking variance, because we're proposing to park under the house. And that sort of led to this dilemma where we have to ask for that extra half story. I don't see the clicker, but if you could please, Leah, can you go to the last image of my presentation? Yeah, that image. So because of flood zone, we're average rate's about 8 feet, and it's 8, 11, so finished floor would have to be at 13 feet. So if we were to request a parking variance, which we're not doing, we'd be 5 feet off grade anyway. And we would actually be, of course, relative to your approval, we would be eligible for 2.5 stories. So we'd actually potentially could have more heated square footage on this lot. We're just asking for 2 stories, and the house is just over 900 square feet what we're proposing. So this image, you can see that, and this was the argument that we made at ER, which was successful, 5-0, was that we were just asking for an additional 3 feet for that base story, but then that was sort of lost or made up for the fact that we're not proposing the half story or the gable roof. So I know it's a little confusing, and but I think the concept is, and if you need to go back to the site plan, we're sort of keeping the same footprint, the same height as what was approved in 2017, but the big change is that we're requesting to park underneath the house, which kicks in this extra half story. And then, of course, we're asking for the special exception and basically to reestablish those setbacks that were granted in 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Has any effort been made to contact the owner of the property at 42 Boyer? It seems like that's the most impacted property.
I'm here with the prospective buyer of the lot. The owner who's owned the property for 3 or 4 years, we've apparently, I haven't tried to approach the owner. Apparently, they're not able to contact the owner.
They're out of state. It's around the clock.
That was my question too.
Any other questions for Mr. Tucker? Mr. Barber, is there anything you'd like to say in support?
No, I sent that in earlier. I didn't think I was gonna be able to make the meeting tonight, and I did realize after I sent it, there was a typo at the end. So I did kind of want to try and salvage that. But again, I live in the white 2-story house that's directly across from this. And, I'm in support of it. It's a piece of vacant property that's basically fills up with cars on the weekend and people try to find a place to park. And, as the neighborhood, we'd like to see it develop. We think this is a good plan, a good idea. I love the fact it's got off-street parking, because like I said, everybody there other than me fenced in their yard, so everybody's trying to park. My only concern was the end of Boyer Court, in these drawings, I'm sure the city's gonna have to come out there. I've been in touch with them. I mean, we got that road in street put aside, but trying to keep people from coming down there, but the road's there, it's just gotta be, and it might be a part of the construction process of cleaning that up as they get back to it, so. But, I'm in support of it. Several other neighbors are, none of them have contacted me in opposition, so we're all for it.
All right, any further questions, any discussion, questions for Lee?
Hey, can I see the building on the lot again? Do you have one with the house on the lot, the new proposed on the lot?
This image,
Let's see, I'm looking for the lot and then the building sitting on it.
site plan.
Site plan?
Oh. This,
That's it, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
so the 3 foot. 3 feet. 3 foot setback from the rear dashed line.
And this neighboring property is built on the line as well. Okay. Thank you.
The owner, I think, is CM Inc. Is that right? Did I read that correctly?
I think so.
And Lee, just for clarity on the story height, I know that question is not before us, it's just a question of occupancy, but the lowest floor, even though it's labeled story, does not constitute a story because it's not, with FEMA and everything else, it's not, it can't be finished, right?
Well,
Or is
the
that,
proposed house with our current height regulations in the city, in the old city, our historic district, that does count as a story. Anything over 6 feet in height would count as a story under the current rules, and so once you elevate it to provide that parking underneath, it becomes a story.
But again, that question's not before us, that's a good address.
Right.
It seems like about the only way you can squeeze a house on this property is very tight. Quite a bit for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second this.
Mr. McKay seconds the motion to approve. Can I see one more thing? Can I see the image again of the house at 42 Boyer Court?
That's it, right? Is 42 the blue one to the right of the lower image, or is it the one here?
It's this single house.
Okay.
Okay. All right, do you want to, why don't we, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. Variance and special exception are granted for 40 Boyer Court. Thank you very much, sir. All right. Number 6, under B, 905 Ashley Avenue, Wagner Terrace, TMS number 463-11-03-030, zoned SR2, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a vertical extension, second-story addition with bedrooms, baths, to a non-conforming building footprint having a 0.8-foot north side setback, 9 feet are required. The owners are Timothy and Marissa Werner. The applicant is Amber Oman. Mr. Batchelder.
This is in Wagner Terrace, existing home, and here's an image of this existing one-story house that sits on the property. And, site plan showing the house with a very narrow north side setback down to 0.8 feet rear corner. And this site plan shows the proposed changes. So this portion of the existing house back here becomes a 2-story section of the house. And then they also add this 1-story, 2-story addition back here as well, but that part of the addition meets the setback requirements. And there's also a deck back here. Again, that is allowed under an exception in the ordinance, so there's no issue there. But the second story addition in this location, where they've highlighted it light brown color, that is what requires the board's approval for a vertical extension of that non-conforming building setback, that rear corner. And floor plans, adding additional living space, master bedroom. In elevation, this is what it looks like. So this is the north elevation on that rear corner that comes closest to the side property line where the exception is required. And this is the 2-story section of the house that is proposed, with this second story being the requiring the exception for. And The rest of the proposal back here, all that is compliant. So it's just this one portion of proposed addition. that's required. And more elevation views. Cross sections. Street. Then there's letters of support. So we have letters from neighbors, including the surrounding properties. So 907 Ashley Avenue on the north side of this lot, and 10 Piedmont, which I think is adjacent to this property as well. And so those two letters came in stating that they support this proposal. So this is a special exception for the vertical extension, and then a variance to allow the addition with a 64% lot occupancy. Sites, I'm sorry, wait a minute. This is a special exception to allow this vertical extension. That's the only request that's before you on this application, this property. And our recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone here who intends to speak against, in opposition to the application for special exception at 905 Ashley Avenue? If you're here in opposition, please raise your hand. All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant here? All right, is there anything you'd like to say to the board? Any questions? Yes, Ms. Grant.
I have a question for the owner applicant, please. I noticed that the letters of support were for BAR for February 2022 for the demolition component of the project. Were you able to get support from the neighbors for this addition?
So they saw the same exact plan. So it would be reflective of what they were in support of as well.
Okay, because they specifically mentioned the demolition component. So I was a little concerned just because of the scale of the addition, of not having something in writing from them.
So what they saw and what BAR approved was this exact set of drawings. And so they understood what would be under historic demo at that time and what we would be replacing.
Okay, so they saw the addition plans. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Lee or for the applicant? Any discussion, or are we ready to entertain a motion?
I'll just add, I think of the reform for the issues. It doesn't have the gable end the way the rest of the front porch has, that advantage to that. It kind of minimizes and cuts down those corners, so it reduces some of the visibility, which helps to some degree hide it behind the main structure.
I'll move for approval.
All right, Mr. Goodwin moves to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and the special exception for 905 Ashley Avenue is approved. The next item on our agenda, B7, 128 Cannon Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-11-04-158, zoned LB. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow the establishment of two dwelling units, a duplex, with 2,831 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, 3,000 square feet are required. The owner is Renee Gators. The applicant is Tyler A. Smith Architects. Mr. Batchelder.
So 128 Cannon Street is a commercially zoned property in Elliott Borough. The home, the residential structure that sits on the property has been used as an office for a number of years by the current owner and other tenants. That building, I think it's got at least a couple different office spaces. And but prior to that, it was used for many years as a duplex. Even though it's commercially zoned, it is a residential structure and it was used as a duplex. Here's the aerial image of the property. So you had the historic single house up here with this rear addition that is, I think that's pretty old too. So just one of those things. It was the 2 units on this lot did not comply with the zoning regulations. It did not have the minimum lot area that was required for 2 units. But so I'm guessing that duplex use predated the rules that we have had for at least 40 years or so, strict densities in these commercially zoned properties. So, but like I said, at some point, and I don't remember exactly when, but it's been maybe 10, 15 years ago, the use was converted to office use. And now the applicant is proposing to go back to residential. And so they would restore elements of the house and convert it back to 2 residential units, with the front historic portion being 1 unit and the back portion being the second unit. Here you see that there's plenty of space in the backyard for parking, so that's not an issue. And the site plan shows how that might look. And then you see on the floor plans that the front unit is shown here. The dividing wall is shown right here in the proposed floor plan. And upstairs, again, the dividing wall between the 2 units is this wall right here. And so this requires a variance to have 2 dwelling units reestablished on the property, because again, it doesn't meet the minimum lot area per unit requirement. It falls just a few hundred square feet short. But they presented their proposal to Edinburgh Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association and received a letter in support of that neighborhood association, citing the fact that the property historically has had 2 power meters. They voted to support the request to reestablish these 2 units. So then we also have a letter from an adjoining property owner in case of this as well. So, and other letters.
Lots of letters.
So our recommendation is for approval to reestablish those 2 units on this property.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anyone here in opposition to the application for 128 Cannon Street? In opposition, raise your hand. No one here in opposition. Do we have the owner or applicant? Mr. Smith, anything you'd like to say to the board?
I don't.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Any questions for the city? Any discussion? Are we ready for a motion? I'll move for approval. All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and the variance for 128 Cannon is approved. Thank you.
Very much.
All right, the next item on our agenda is 154 Cannon Street, Cannon Borough, Elliott Borough, TMS number 460-11-04-131, Zone GB, requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow retail use on the first floor cigar sitting area with 716 square feet, and a private club on the second floor with 434 square feet, with 5 parking spaces. 12 spaces are required. The owner is Kirk Beacon. The applicant is Joel Adrian, Coastal Creek Design. Mr. Batchelder.
So 154 Cannon Street, commercially zoned property. This has been used as an office for a number of years, but it's located actually on Cannon Street, but west of President Street. So technically, it's not within the Shannonboro Neighborhood Association area neighborhood district, because that western border is President Street for that neighborhood for some reason. And this part of Cannon Street, Spring Street, the little court in between, kind of cut off from the neighborhood for some reason. But it's commercially zoned. This property has been used as an office for a number of years. And you see that there's a surface parking lot that has access directly from Cannon Street. And it wraps this property and actually has some parking spaces on the property behind the building, the historic single house. So the office use was fine, didn't require too many parking spaces because office space does not require much parking compared to retail and the proposed club use. But what they want to do is convert the ground floor into a retail space. And then have the second floor as a club space. So ground floor, retail, and upstairs a club space for members to go up and smoke their cigars. And so that's the plan. And of course, this requires more parking than the office use did. So the issue in front of the board is a special exception to allow these uses on this property without providing all of the required parking. They do have 5 parking spaces on site. And then they have an opportunity to use other spaces in that surface lot after normal workday hours. So there is additional parking on site. Of course, there's on-street parking in the neighborhood in that area as well. So our recommendation is for approval. I know I can speak that they're not going to find any off-site parking spaces in the immediate area that would be eligible for lease, and that they could lease because there's just simply no parking in that area that somebody's going to agree to a long-term lease for parking in order to meet the requirements, and that would be a 10-year lease that would be required in order to satisfy those requirements. So they don't have that opportunity in this area. So our recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Lee. And I think we do have a letter from the neighborhood association on this one.
Yes.
And I think they were neutral.
Yes, they were neutral.
All right, anybody here in opposition to the application for 154 Cannon Street? If you're here in opposition, yes, sir, hold your horses. We're gonna hear from the applicant first. So do we have Mr. Adrian? Are you still here? Yeah.
Yes.
So, Mr. Adrian, I have a preliminary question for you. You were here earlier on behalf of Studio 291 LLC, and now you're here on the behalf of Coastal Creek Design LLC.
That was my question too.
Next meeting's another company.
All right, Mr. Adrian, please tell us about the
Tax
application.
accountants after me for Studio 291, so no, I'm joking. Yes, I do have 2 design companies partners, and this happens to be Coastal Creek Design.
Gotcha.
We've been working with Kurt, the owner, for quite some time. properties to see if they would accommodate business use. Parking makes it out. I feel like this one is really an ideal location with the fact that there are 5 dedicated spaces to this parcel. And then the opportunity to use the other space within that lot right adjacent to this parcel for the premium hours of when the club would be functioning. We're eventually limiting hours of operation to no later than midnight, weekends, 10 o'clock on weekdays, for the club portion, the retail portion closing most likely around 6 o'clock. But maintain the historic house. The special exception requirement, I think what's important is, first off, the use that we're proposing is allowed. So it's not like we're asking for a variance to use something, to use the property in use that isn't allowed within the ordinance. Second item is that, are there spaces available on the property to park? And if you look at, there's one of the site plans that shows rezoning, not that one, the next sheet back. This one here, you can see that their property lines have been adjusted to make the parking lot to work. And so the house at 154 pretty much considers a lot of 154. There's no way to actually access 154 off of Cannon Street and try to find a parking lot. So that obviously is why there's the parking lot needs spaces to that building. Building right now, interior wise, has no drywall or flooring, no HVAC. So it was used as an office at some point. It's been gutted. It's waiting for the next user. We are looking at providing a very high class club up on the second floor. We limited membership. We have limited times probably when we have major occupancy, those for special events. First floor being retail, would accommodate people to be able to go purchase cigars, sit down, enjoy talking, enjoy the smokes. I think that probably covers it. That second floor, the floor plans are provided. You can see that the second floor would be just the club area. First floor really just for retail. No changes to the structure of being proposed exterior. Everything will be happening inside the shop.
Mr. Adrian, how are the 18 parking spaces that you believe will be available at some times? Tell me how that works. What are they used for and at what times?
If you go to that part, there is a site plan ahead, but there's this part that is there. So if you look at that plan, it was 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Those are the dedicated spots for this structure here. The other ones are used for the adjacent building.
What is the use of the adjacent building? Is it an office?
And then, I'm not 100% sure, I believe it is office.
Okay.
But that parking lot empties out. It's just vacant. So we would have access to being able to park in those spaces.
Do you have to have permission to have access to those spaces?
So, yes, we would certainly work with the adjacent owner to make sure that we're allowed to park there. But the access is there. It's the only parking lot that would have that opportunity, other than, as Leah mentioned, there are lots of street parking spaces in the area. Most of those are residential sub-districts, so there's time limits on those.
And is the general concept or idea that you would be, that the retail would be, that the 5 spaces would be sufficient for the retail during the day, and you expect more guests or visitors or club members, I guess would be the term if it's a private club, it would be busier at night, and so more spaces would be available at night.
Yes, and I think on the floor plan sheet, maybe if you start cycle through a couple of sheets, there should be a parking calculation down here. So first floor, the retail floor is where these requires 2 spaces. So obviously we've got 5, so the retail is certainly a piece that we accommodate on our site, so it would be for the club, which are the additional spaces.
What is the capacity for that private club?
Based off the square footage, I believe it was 28 people that were allowed to be in that area. It is, yes, it was 28 people that were allowed to be in the building at one time.
So if you did have access to the 18 spaces, presumably meet that capacity requirement.
Yeah, so we have, the way that it's calculated is it's one space required for every 3 occupants. It was 28, which got us to the total of 12.
There wasn't an opportunity with the garage across the street with the MUSC's garage. Do they not lease
I know I've
spaces?
been offered my wife's badge. So we just these first little 3 here.
We have approvals from neighboring properties. I know there's a couple of businesses that face President Street, church in President Street, residential alley behind this property. Do we have any letters of support?
I don't have any letters of support for those. We did, we sent it to Marion, as requested, and came back and said we defer to whatever the board and city decides. City obviously is.
Did he defer because Lee, as Lee mentioned, it's outside of their neighborhood boundaries, or did he discuss why?
No, I think if you look at his letter, it says that normally they're in support of these applications, so maybe the deferral is because it's outside, but the request for parking variances or special exceptions, there's only 3 reasons.
Who controls the additional parking beyond the 5 spaces?
There is a regime, a horizontal regime for that parking lot, that is in control of the established space.
And this property is a part of that regime?
It is, it's listed on, there's a document for the horizontal regime that's in there. This one here. So it lists, so these units, so I'm sorry, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 apartment spaces dedicated to one.
All right, anybody else have questions for the applicant? If not, we'll hear from the patient gentleman in the back.
I just really, it wasn't opposition.
Please come on up here and state your name and address for the record, please.
My wife and I are the owner occupant of 150 Cannon, and
Your name, please.
Charles Rackley.
Thank you, Mr. Rackley.
Charles Rackley. We've been there for about 4.5 years now and have become close neighbors with pretty much everybody on our block that backs around us and whatnot. We're all very much in support of the cigar bar going in. I know the main concern really is because the street parking is so limited. There's 4 girls that live above a known cafe that park on the street right there, and then my wife and myself. That's 6 cars on the street every night. It's never been, even when no was open, I can count on less than one hand how many times I've had to park around the corner. I'm up so late that I just wait until everybody's gone and move everything back. So, I mean, like I said, it's no opposition to y'all. It's just the parking side of things. And then the other big concern from everybody that was kind of expressed was more out of safety, honestly, is it is notorious how many people come through that light, coming the opposite way down the street. And then even when patients are there to see, oh, by the way, you asked who owns the building in between us and 154, so 152. It's Dr. Mike Barrentino, chiropractor office, Sarah Pope law office, and then Dr. Spicer, psychologist. And I think they talked to y'all as well about renting parking spaces to you after they're done. and they're very amenable to all this as well, so, like I said, main concern is just for the safety of the patrons and stuff, and honestly, I'll probably be there every other day for a cigar myself. But, otherwise, that was just the main concern, and then you've answered everything else that I had questions about as far as hours of operation. Didn't realize we fell that close on the curve outside the Canada, Elliott Borough. Forward lines, all the stuff over there. But yeah, so the parking, the other thing for the parking, I don't know if y'all checked, but there's catty corner to Nome, or where Nome used to be. There's a gravel parking lot right there. And I know they lease spots over there, so that might be another option for y'all to check into. So, but other than that, thanks y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Bracken.
Good luck.
Appreciate your comments. Anybody else in opposition to the application for 154 Cannon Street? All right, Mr. Adrian, you get an opportunity to respond.
So I guess I want to respond to that. I don't know that it was really opposition. Didn't say we support the application. So I was just say that's, I think the city supported it. It's a family's use for the area, and it would be positive. Any other questions for me on that?
I have a couple questions if you don't mind. I am slightly curious on the history of the subdivision of the property. It seems like maybe they acquired all 3 lots and then split off the house or the building by itself.
As far as I know, I was not part of it.
So, and maybe my following question to that is related to access to parking after hours. It seems like there would be an opportunity to reach some agreement, about hours. I think that would be really beneficial to have that in place. I think considering it's an after hours use, I think I'd like to see something like that. Generally speaking, to kind of establish a clear demarcation when this space is available. That said, I'm not opposed to the application in general. I think that's just one aspect of maybe a conditional.
Right. I mean, Lee, I assume we could approve with the condition that the additional parking spaces to meet the 12 space requirement, that they provide some written agreement or proof of an agreement to utilize those spaces after hours, after business hours. Is that a condition we could place on the approval?
You certainly could.
And I sensed a little hesitance in your
No,
in
I
your
mean, you certainly
voice
could.
and response there.
That's an option.
And I'll preface that with my sort of concern would be that they come back and say no, or you promise them something else, for example. Now it seems to me that you're hopeful that there will be some, but it's not been
And this can be confirmed, but I think that the nature of the special exception request is that you would look at the application, using the building and say, we're okay with this use, this being granted, and obtain those additional spaces on the site. And that's bad. So we have street parking upstairs. A lot of these people are riding together because they're not going there.
So you would obviously prefer that the board approves the application without the condition to require some agreement as to parking for those additional
Certainly
spaces.
prefer that. I think that our application supports and shows that we meet the conditions of special exception. So that would be the ideal for us.
The term private club goes along with the property and not the entity, is that right?
It's property, correct.
So my concern would be that someone else could have a different use. We could approve it. And I'm more inclined to see something in writing about some sort of agreement because I think parking's gonna be be a huge issue.
I agree.
I will move for approval of a condition that with agreement for access to this parking space is provided.
All right, so Mr. Bennett has moved to approve with the condition that the applicant provide some evidence in writing of an agreement to use the additional parking spaces after business hours. That's correct, sufficient. All right, after business hours being 6 p.m., not your business hours, obviously. Thank you. You have, did I hear a second? All right, Ms. Grass seconds the motion to approve with that condition. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Goodwin is opposed. The motion passes by majority vote, and the special exception with the condition of the agreement on conditional parking is granted. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B9, 134 Smith Street, Radcliffe Road, PMS number 46016010098, zone VR1. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a detached single-family residence, existing detached duplex, to be converted to a single-family residence, creating a total of 2 detached single-family residences having a 47% lot occupancy, 35% limit, existing lot occupancy 33%. The owner is Cornelius Thomas. The applicant is Julie O'Connor, American Vernacular, Inc. Mr. Batchel.
134 Smith Street is a residential property in Radcliffe Borough. And this map shows its location in the block of Smith between Vandross and Warren Street. It is across the street from the Ashley Hall campus. And to the north is a corner of Warren, and Smith Street is a residential structure that is now owned by Ashley Hall. And to the south is an apartment complex, the Free Will Apartments, on the corner of Smith and Vandross Street. And this aerial view shows the historic home on the property. And more information from the applicant. And this is the site with the lot occupancies of the surrounding buildings on those lots noted on this particular plan, because one of their, the request that they're asking for is a variance to allow them to change the existing house from a duplex into a single family home and then build a second unit that is permitted on this lot by virtue of the lot area and zoning. Build a new second unit in the back of this existing home, backyard of the property, and exceed the lot occupancy limit of 35% buildings on the lot. They are proposing a lot occupancy of 47%. So they've noted on this plan surrounding lot occupancies, and they vary considerably from 30s all the way up to 72% on the corner of Thomas, I think that's Thomas, and Warren Street, block behind, or the street to the east of Smith Street. And then there are multiple properties that have lot occupancies in the 40% range. So anyway, this is a survey showing the existing property and the house that sits on it. And here's a image of an auto turn analysis that shows how they would provide the 4 parking spaces on the lot with the new building at the back of the lot shown here. So they can provide the required 4 parking spaces on site and still have the ability to turn cars around so they're not backing out on Smith Street. It makes it more practical to actually park in these spaces. So they don't have a parking issue. And here is the site plan showing the proposed house at the back of the lot. Images of the existing house. And Sanborn maps, elevations showing existing and proposed. So they would convert what is now the duplex in that main house, that historic home, to a single family. Move those unattractive stairs in the back. And make some other changes. Then new building shown on the right side of this proposed elevation. These are all existing historic home, showing the changes they would make. This is the proposed. Two-bedroom house. And then they have letters from some nearby neighbors here, 132 Smith Street, 66 Vandross Street. Getting their support for this. And so that concludes that. So the issue is lot occupancy, not the number of units. The property, as I said, is large enough with the zoning to allow 2 dwelling units on the lot. They meet the parking requirements, so that's not an issue. They're building this building to conform to the setback requirements, so there's no issue there. So the only issue is the lot occupancy of buildings on the lot and exceeding that 47% lot occupancy, which again is not unusual for that neighborhood. Falls within that range, and there were a number of lots with lot occupancies in the 40% range. I think it's not uncommon to have a variation like that in these older neighborhoods, and once you get up to 50%, then you're really going pretty high. A 50% building that occupies 50% of the lot is pretty substantial. We have those neighborhoods downtown, but this is staying under that threshold, which would be allowed if the property was zoned DR1F versus DR1, but it's zoned DR1, so 35% is the maximum allowed, and you need a variance to go over that. So I think it's a reasonable request. I know that the applicant has, I think, reached out to the neighborhood association. I'm not sure if there's been a response from them on this, but the applicant is here to speak to that. And I think I see some other folks from the back of the road as well here tonight, so perhaps they want to address the board. But I think it's a reasonable request, so I'm willing to be supportive of the request.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anyone here tonight to speak in opposition to the application of 134 Smith Street? If you're here in opposition, please raise your hand. Thank you, sir. Ms. O'Connor, you have the owners here as well.
Yes.
You'll present.
I'm Julie O'Connor, and I'm the designer on this project. And I thank Mr. Batchelder and Ms. Ashby for meeting with me recently about this project. We did in fact meet with the homeowners association or the neighborhood association president and their representative who deals with VAR and BZA committee. But their official neighborhood meeting is not until next week. And so they weren't able to write in support, but they were very supportive. We met on site. They were especially supportive that we were going to be restoring this house to its single family glory. It has been in disrepair for many, many years and neglected. And now we have a new owner. And luckily a lot of the history and beautiful stair and moldings and all of that have been preserved inside despite the fact that it was turned into college housing. But the neighborhood is very excited that it will not be college housing anymore. And we are very excited to restore the house. So just to just add to Lee's presentation, which was very comprehensive, I did prepare this graphic for you. And we sort of looked at 41 neighboring properties, and 70% of them are over the 35% lot occupancy. So we feel that our property, it's not unreasonable for us to request something similar in terms of the variance test. The house was built in 1895, and so restoring it back to single family is very important from a preservation perspective and from a neighborhood perspective. We are not increasing the number of bedrooms. This was something that Mr. Batchelder wanted to talk about with me when we met, by reducing the number of bedrooms in the main house and adding 2 to the back house. We are sort of maintaining that existing number of bedrooms. So occupancy wise, not just lot occupancy, but otherwise it will be remain the same. And I'm happy to, the only other thing I wanted to talk about was something that Mr. Batchelder touched on, which is this neighborhood is kind of eclectic in terms of its uses, with Ashley Hall School there and a very large apartment complex directly adjacent to this property. And so again, we feel like in terms of the neighborhood, we're actually improving the neighborhood with this request rather than being a detriment. Happy to answer any questions.
So you're very, very close to Ashley Hall's right across the street.
Right across the street and next door.
Does the school have a position on this application?
We didn't hear back from them. In fact, the owner's agent is here. She had a great PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet. She reached out to everyone that was abutting our property, and we only heard back from those 2 neighbors, and never heard back from anybody else.
Okay, and how long ago did that notice go out to the neighbors?
A couple of months ago.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. O'Connor while she's up here?
I had one question. What is the square footage of the secondary
It's
house?
1,400 square feet. And it does have to be elevated higher than the front house due to flood. So that's why it's a little bit higher underneath.
Is that the total square footage of the footprint?
That's the total square footage.
All right, if we don't have any other questions for the applicant presently, you want to give the owners a chance to speak, or are you going to defer to Ms. O'Connor?
Hi, my name's Beth Henry, and as Julie mentioned, I'm the agent for the owner Cornelius. I just wanted to add, we did reach out to all the neighbors that touched the house, and I had verbal support from 2 additional neighbors, including the one whose property kind of L shapes and goes directly behind ours, but only was able to get the written letters from the 2 they also. So in total, we had 4 of the neighbors that gave support. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, anybody else in support of the application? Are you here in opposition or in support, sir?
Neither.
Okay. Could you please,
I'm Jim Doyle, I'm the vice president, right, of the department. Ms. O'Connor's comments are exactly correct. We are mum because we use a different mechanism than most of other people. If we require a meeting with the association to give a yea or nay. Personal note, I want to note that that lot is surrounded by infill. So secondary buildings, they're all around it and in back of it.
thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. All right, anyone else to speak in support of the application? And if not, sir, we'll hear from you in opposition. Please state your name and address.
Yes, sir. Peter Brainerd, 58 Warren Street, about a short parcel away. I'm speaking, I represent only myself today. Just mostly comments on, I certainly want our neighborhood housing to be restored and rehabilitated, so all in favor of that. But you know, there is a house there that takes up 33% of the lot, and it's asking for 47%. We've heard that 3/4 of the properties, you know, in our neighborhood have something more, take out more than 35%. I wonder what is the, our property doesn't take up 50%, should I expect to be able to come in here someday and say, oh, I wanna make my house go from 30 to 50? What's the unique hardship here? What is the hardship that this property can't exist and abide by the current zoning rules? And to say that sort of everybody's doing it, you know, driving down I-26, they pulled over, said, well, officer, everybody's speeding. That just doesn't work. So I just like the board to sort of consider what is the unique hardship that is would cause you to say, oh yeah, it looks nice. Everyone's property look nice in the design, and I would love it to look nice. But I want, the rules should be the rules unless there's a reason to grant variance.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. And you said you live on Warren Street, is that
Yes, sir.
right? Okay. Is Warren Street depicted on this map? I know it's adjacent to Smith. This is Warren. Okay.
Right between, not visible, just between Thomas and Common.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to the application at 134 Smith? All right, Ms. O'Connor, would you like to address Mr. Brandon's concerns?
Yeah, I'll just, obviously you know this, but number 1 and number 2 of the variance test specifically answer that question, which is our property being treated differently than other properties in the neighborhood? And so that's just the answer to that question.
Any other questions for the applicant or for the city or any discussion? Lee, I think you mentioned at the end of your presentation that if the zoning were a different classification, of course, that's true on almost anything, but I'm just curious as to why you mentioned that. The zoning was, I think you said.
Yeah. Well, I guess the point there was that we have 2 different lot occupancy limitations in our residential zones. And one of them is 35%. One of them is 50%. So I'm not sure why 35% was chosen. That goes back to the 60s when the zoning ordinance was written. Those districts that we have today were created with those restrictions. But some areas of the city have 35% restriction. Other areas, maybe within the same neighborhoods, have a 50% restriction, and probably there's some pattern where you find more prevalence of lot occupancy of existing structures that would be higher than 35% that would justify the 50% restriction. But for instance, in this area, you see a lot of properties that have more than 35% lot occupancies. And so I don't think they necessarily, the folks that did this ordinance back in the 60s had the technology we have today to be able to analyze this kind of thing. Because to me, 35% restriction is pretty restrictive. I think that's overly restrictive for the peninsula. So we've had many requests for people to go above that, but still not exceed 50%. In these kinds of situations where we've had a analysis of surrounding lot occupancies, found that many lots exceeded the 35% restriction. We've been supportive of reasonable requests. I think this seems to be a reasonable request. I think, again, the lot is large enough to have 2 dwelling units on it. And they would like to make the existing historic home 1 unit, which seems perfectly reasonable, to restore the house to what it was at one point, and then build a new dwelling unit in the backyard, new structure. That seems to be a very reasonable request, but they can't do it without getting the variance to exceed that lot occupancy. So then it becomes a question of, is 47% too much? Could it be 42%? You know, that sort of thing.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Does the new structure would have to be raised?
Yes, it does have to be raised to meet the requirements and the freeboard requirement.
Change the dynamic of
So it's a little bit higher. You can see in this image, the side
Oh, I didn't
elevations of
see
the existing and proposed.
Okay, so I have another follow-up question for you, and I have a question for the applicant. For you, Lee, what is the distinction in the residential zoning classifications? Why are some lots zoned with the DR1 classification and others zoned in the, what was the other one?
DR1F.
DR1,
Or
yeah.
DR2F.
What is the governing characteristic of one versus the other?
Well, the 1F and 2F districts have a front yard setback that is 25 feet. That, again, I don't know where they came up with that requirement, because that doesn't fit very many properties in the historic district. But we do have exceptions in the ordinance that we've added that allow for those front setbacks to be reduced when you have adjoining homes on adjoining lots that don't meet those requirements. Like the new home can be as close as whichever home is closest to the street, because we want to see that pattern of development continue.
Is there a defining characteristic that would make one lot a DR1 and another lot of?
I don't know. Again, the main defining characteristic is the lot occupancy restriction going from 35% on DR1 to 50% on DR1F. I will say 1F does have a rear yard setback requirement of 25 feet, so that's different than DR1, which has a 3-foot rear setback requirement. So there's a significant difference there.
And maybe I've asked the question in an inartful way, but I understand that there are different requirements. But what would make the city designate one lot the one classification and another lot a different classification?
Well, they never gave me that option, so I'm not sure I know
So
the
it's
answer to
a,
that
it's
question.
it's a product of the history of the zoning of the city, and some
Right.
lots may have been zoned one way, some lots may have been zoned a different way, and we don't really know the answer to that
Right.
question.
But the other thing is that we are, of course, starting the process of revising, doing a substantial revision to the city zoning ordinance. And the consultant's working on that. Met with us and talked about trying to do something to remove some of those substantial restrictions that we continually
Bump up against.
variances. Yeah, bump up against. Okay. I've owned 2 homes on the peninsula and had to get variances on both of them really to build very reasonable buildings that fit the pattern of development in those situations. So it's so common that you can't do much on your property in these neighborhoods in the way of additions or restoration of features that were once there without getting some sort of board approval. So that seems to me to be wrong. We ought to make it easier for people to do the right thing, harder for people to do the bad things if they don't like it.
Can you flip over to slide 147, the Sanborn maps?
147, I don't know
Your slide have numbers.
which one was
It's
that?
the one with the Sanborn maps on it.
Oh.
Just, it's hard to tell from here, but zooming in, I was just noticing on that property, all the way through until, sometime after 1955 to where we are today, it's always had a dependency dwelling in the back, some sort of dwelling in the back. So I'm pretty comfortable that's what the character of that lot has been, which is kind of consistent with most of the neighborhood.
Is that a dwelling unit or like a garage or storage? Because
No, I
it's
don't
empty,
know.
I can't see.
I don't know what the map showed.
Do you have any comments, Ms. O'Connor, on this graphic?
Yeah, I can't, see, there, but it definitely always has had another building.
And it's gone now?
It is gone
It's
now.
been demolished?
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
All right.
And so, again, just, to Lee's point there, with that house occupying 33%, no addition would be able to be, even that small structure wouldn't even be able to be built without a variance.
And this is a historic renovation, correct?
It is,
And
yeah.
you're restoring a house to what it was originally, correct? And in order to do that, does it make it more economically feasible or make it economically feasible by adding that accessory
correct.
structure? Is that
That's
right?
correct,
So you
yeah.
need the accessory structure in order to renovate the house in a
right.
historic way. All right.
That's right.
What's the square footage of the main house?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see if I have it here. I do. 3,000.
I don't have any issues with the application. My only question is regarding the neighbor who has some concerns, and then the vice president of Radcliffe Borough Neighborhood Association, mentioning that the meeting is upcoming. And I don't know if if it's something that should come before the neighborhood association for a formal vote. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but that's my only concern.
I'm sort of in the mindset that 47% is not. I see your point. There's a lot of value in having public input from the neighborhood association as well. It's a formal response. I won't say that. I don't know that the 47 is necessarily detriment to the character of the neighborhood. We're seeing very similar percentages throughout the neighborhood. And I do actually have another question. What's the difference between the D1 and the DT2, or DR1 and DR2? Because it's a DR2 just immediately adjacent to the south. I was just curious.
The side setbacks are a little different. They're less in DR2. And the required lot area per dwelling unit is less in DR2. So in other words, you might be able to do 3 units on this lot if it was on DR2 versus 2 at DR1.
My only question was, do y'all feel that scale wise and size wise, the 3,000 square foot main house and the 1,400 square foot is appropriate size for the accessory building? That's my only question.
Well, it can't do much about changing the square footage of the existing structure,
No.
right? I mean,
But
that's
the other
is
could
what
be
it is.
smaller.
And then if they're gonna have an accessory structure, I don't know. So Connor, how did you all come up with the size of the accessory structure? What was your thought process
I
through
will
that?
comment as well that this will have to go to BAR, just
Yeah.
as a matter of interest.
Yeah.
We wanted 2 bedrooms and just wanted it to be a comfortable 2-bedroom, wanted a piazza, wanted a porch. And so that scale just sort of seemed appropriate.
So the 1,400 square feet includes the exterior or no?
No.
No, okay. The concern that was voiced about allowing the Radcliffe Borough Neighborhood Association to make a recommendation. Do you have any comments on that? Do you support or oppose
Well,
the idea of
obviously
the
I'd
board
like to-
deferring?
Yeah, obviously I'd like to go away with an approval tonight. And I will say that we did meet with the neighborhood president and the committee chair for zoning and VAR, and they felt very comfortable and confident and happy with what we were doing, but again, mentioned that they couldn't write anything formally because the meeting is next week.
And they have put it on the agenda for.
They did not, simply because we were coming in, ahead of the meeting. So I don't know if we'd be able to be on the agenda or not.
But presumably, because you do have a BAR approval upcoming, presumably if they have issues with what it is that you're trying to do, that they have a forum to express those.
For sure, we will have to go to the board with the back house, probably not with the front house, simply because we're really cleaning up some pretty bad things that were done to the house, so I probably won't have to present the restoration of the front house to the BAR, but for sure we'll have to do the back house.
Our only question is whether to grant the variance on the lot coverage this evening, like the rest of the BAR.
I'll make a motion for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett has moved to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. McKay has seconded the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Grass is opposed. The motion passes. The variance is granted for 134 Smith Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is B10 35 Trillo Street, EMS number 458-09-02-007, zone LD, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow 8 residential dwelling units with 1,230 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. 2,250 square feet are required. Requesting a variance from section 54-319 to provide 5 parking, 30 spaces at a parking lot located at 11 East Elliott Street, 675 feet from this property. The ordinance limits the distance to 400 feet from the building or use. The owner is Prelude Enterprises LLC. The applicant is Nelson Mullins, Riley and Scarborough LLP, J.S. Claypool. Mr. Batchel.
35 Prelude Street has been before the board before. This is the old Harbor Club property. And came before you in February for a special exception to allow building to be converted into a 40 44 room, I can't remember exactly, but it was, the accommodations use. That's what was approved, and that required the board's approval for a special exception. And it's also approved that the parking that was required for that use would be located at an off-site parking lot that was more than 500 feet away from this property. And that was a variance, and that was approved. Now the applicant is also requesting approval to convert the building into a retail use on the ground floor and 8 apartments, 8 residential dwelling units on the upper floors as an alternative to that accommodations use. So that approval would still be valid. That might be an opportunity for them to do that use, or this would be a second opportunity to repurpose the building. So just to refresh your memory, this property shown on the zoning map has a building that occupies the entire lot. It is own limited business, and shown here, this view, this aerial view. The original building was a 3-story building across the entire length, actually 3.5 stories. But the earthquake in the 1880s took care of the half-story and also demolished part of the 3rd story of the building. So since then, it's been this combination of a 3-story, 2-story structure, with the back portion of the property closest to Spade being a 1-story structure. And this is the location of the proposed parking lot. So this is 11 Elliott Street, 11 East Elliott Street. It has a building on it that's a bank teller building that's no longer used, and then surface parking. In this image, you see the parking spaces. And that's where they would have the parking for the hotel. That was approved to be used for that purpose. And but that's also where they're proposing to provide the parking for this proposed use. It's there, plus a few spaces at another lot that they own in Space Street. And then this map shows the location of 35 Crayla Street right here, and the surface parking lot down here, which is zone general office. So it has a commercial zoning as well. And that distance is 675 feet between those 2 properties. So the applicant has submitted their information explaining their variance request. And I'll provide a little bit more information at the end, but these are the slides that they submitted. So existing building, again, has that combination of a 3-story section, 2-story section, and then the 1-story section in the back. And for a number of years, it was a restaurant, a well-known restaurant. And then Harbor Club took over at some point, I think 25 years ago, and operated there for many years until 2021. They moved, 2020 when they moved to the new location. So it's been sitting vacant since then. And it's owned commercially. It could be an office use, although there's no parking. And so any tenant in this building is going to have an issue with parking. And office use downtown is not so popular anymore, at least not the way it used to be. So a lot of these areas over here that are commercially zoned are now residentially used or have some accommodations uses on them. Across the street, you've got One Venue Range, which is condominiums. residential condominiums, and then nearby across towards the opposite, this side of the building over here are structures that had offices, and they're also very nice residential structures with commercial buildings that have been converted to residential uses. So we've got a real mix of those two uses in this area already. But this, lots of information on the site, building, and then proposed floor plans. So retail space on the ground floor, and then you see how they would put the units in the buildings, in the upper floors of the building. And then they're also, with this proposal, proposing to reconstruct the 1.5 story section that was lost, and then add to the 1 story section in the back. And those are VAR issues. They'll have to go through the VAR for approval of those changes. And this is a rendering just showing what a finished building might look like. That's on the historic front part. That's what was originally there. Let's see more information. This is all informational. The applicant can go over if they like. But just a couple things. So you have the subject site right here, 35 Pralo Street, and then you see right across the street is One Venue Range. This is the property that is adjacent to Waterfront Park. It includes a city gallery on it, and includes condominium units at a density that is, even though it's zoned the same way, limited business, with the same requirement for minimum lot area per unit of 2,250 square feet. That property was given a variance to allow the redevelopment of what was a surface parking lot at the time into the condominiums and city gallery. And that project has a lot area per unit of approximately 1,350 square feet per unit. So again, substantial variance was given there to allow that density that exists today. And then these 3 buildings right here, so this is 5, 7, and 9 Cords, just kind of directly across the street from that 1 story section of 35 Prelude Street. Those buildings each have a dwelling unit in them, and each of those lots for those buildings is approximately 1,000 square feet in size. So, very dense residential units in this section of town, because that's the type of buildings we have. We have buildings, no real yard space with these, but these have been converted to very attractive residential units. So there's precedent for what they're proposing to do in terms of the density, and I certainly think it's a reasonable use to encourage appropriate residential density in the upper floors of this building with the commercial use on the ground floor. And that would be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood and allow this building to become useful again and get fixed up. So I think it's a reasonable request, and I recommend approval of this request.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the request for 35 Prelude Street? All right, Mr. Claypool, like to make a presentation? Or,
It's a complicated application. We don't have any opposition. Mr. Batchelder did a fantastic job of summarizing it. I'm happy to tell the board anything you want to know about sort of how we got here.
you might want to tell your Chicago architectural firm that Charleston is in South Carolina, not North Carolina.
Was there a,
It's on every page.
maybe I need to get off top so that how we got here was after the approval for the hotel use in February. I get a call and that took about a year because we had to city council approval to get into the accommodations overlay. 2 months later, I get a call about what if we did ground level retail and accommodating units above, completely abandoned what we've just been working on for a year. And I said, okay, thank you. And I talked to Mr. Batchelder in May. There is and the on-site parking variance is the same that was approved last time. I just want to make it clear that it would apply to residential retail use, like y'all said, it would apply to accommodations.
Right, okay. Does that, when you say they're abandoning it, they still would have vested rights to that
I
use?
should be clear.
Yeah.
The special exception will remain.
Right.
But what I'm being told is now the entire program would go in this direction.
Okay. All right, and so if the board approves this request, then your client will have the option to do one or the other. Yes, okay. Questions for Lee? Questions for Mr. Claypool?
I have a question. The 30 spaces calculated, is that coincidence that it's the same number that was required previously, or is it the same? And maybe it's not 30 required spaces. I'm just curious. In the variance, it says provide 30 spaces. Was that the same as the hotel?
I believe it was slightly less for the hotel. The way we met the parking requirement for the hotel was to obtain, we have a long-term parking lease at 11 Elliott that provides for 30 spaces. The parking requirement under this use, I believe, is 34.
Correct.
And so to meet the 34 parking space requirement for this use would be to use 30 spaces, the long-term lease at 11 Elliott, plus this applicant through another affiliate owns the parking lot at 145 East Bay. And there are 4 additional parking spaces that are available, not being used for another use at 145 East Bay. So 4 plus 30 equals the 34 needed to satisfy this parking.
Are those spaces, those 4 spaces less than, they within the 400-foot limitation?
So no variance would be.
Any other questions, any discussion? At what point, Lee, would they have to make an election? Not until they pull a building permit or?
I suppose they're not gonna move forward and invest all the time and energy to get to the building permit stage without committing to something, I would suppose. So it'd be pretty surprising if they went all that way through and got the permit and then changed their plans.
Theory, if they didn't renew their vested right, they would lose it after a year, right?
Right. After 2 years.
2 years.
Right.
Does the city have any preference as to whether this property is used for an accommodations use or for single family as being proposed today?
Well, we like the idea of more residential in this area. It's become more residential over time. There are existing offices, and we're happy with those, but you've got one Benview Range, you've got Actors Walk immediately to the south, you've got those other units on cords. So the idea of going back with an accommodations use wasn't actually very well received by the staff because we were gonna have to rezone the property back into an accommodations overlay zone when we had just removed it about 10 years ago from that zone. And but people supported that and it went through the process and was approved. But So I think from the staff standpoint, we probably would prefer residential versus more accommodations.
Okay, so a board approval would provide the applicant with that flexibility to ultimately decide to use the property for residential use, which would be, if not favored by the city, at least looked as favorably upon as an accommodation special. Further discussion, questions?
Move for approval.
All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Do I have a second? Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The variance for 35 Prelo Street is granted. Thank you, Jack. All right, item B11 on our agenda, 50 Bogart Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, PMS number 460-08-01-128, zone DR-2F, requesting a use variance from section 54-203 to allow a retail use in cafe that includes sales of beer and wine for on-premises consumption on the ground floor, with 843 square feet of retail space and 392 square feet of cafe patron area in a DR2F zone. Days of operation: Monday closed, Tuesday, Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday, 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow proposed retail cafe use first floor and existing two dwelling units second floor with one off-street parking space. Ordinance requires 10 spaces. Existing uses require 8 spaces. BZA-Z approved 7-space special exception on 5/5/12. Owner is Lindsay Nevin, applicant is George Cook, Loyal Architects. Mr. Batchelder.
That's a mouthful, but what we're dealing with here is a corner store property in Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. And for many years, this building was sort of vacant and kind of falling into disrepair. And then back in 2012, Mr. Nevin bought it, fixed it up, put the current use in that building, which is 2 apartments upstairs, and I can't remember what the ground floor use is, but the applicant can refresh my memory, I'm sure. And here's an image of the corner store building that's there today. So that ground floor space is not allowed to be used for anything other than residential because of the zoning on the property, but that's typical of most of the corner stores on the peninsula. They fall within residentially zoned neighborhoods, and so they're just zoned residentially. We've had to deal with these over the years with trips to the board for changing existing non-conforming uses to other non-conforming uses or use variances to go to new use in this case. And we don't get too many of them anymore because we've dealt with so many over the years already that I don't think we have too many issues anymore. But in this case, you've got a building, I think it's an office use on the ground floor. Yeah. So an office use on the ground floor is nice, but it's not really a corner store type use. So in this case, they're proposing to go back with more of a corner store use, retail and cafe on the ground floor. That includes the sales of wine and beer, on-premises consumption. And 20 years ago, the folks in this neighborhood would have said, hell no, I'm not going to support anything like that. But things have changed over the years, and so the neighborhood has been much more receptive to these kinds of things. And you see that on Bogart Street. Burns is a restaurant that was approved years ago. I think that was Trattoria Luca, maybe. And then Burns is there today, well received in the neighborhood. And there's the wine bar that's a block away from that. Across the street. which is again, another little corner store property that was restored and reused for that kind of a use. So this is very common in this neighborhood. And this proposal not only needs your approval for the use, but also the parking, because that increases with this type of use versus the office use. So, and they put together an application here that highlights some of those other surrounding properties, Burns, Elliottville, Mini Bar, Alessandro's, that's actually a commercially zoned property. Cuddy's, same thing, but these other ones are not commercially zoned. Chubby Fish is now a commercially zoned property, but it wasn't originally when it opened. So anyway, not unusual for the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is supportive of this request. Here's a letter from the neighborhood association indicating that they are supportive. And then here's a letter from the immediate neighbor to the east, Stephen and Danielle Ramos, who have voiced their support in this letter as well. So, and we're not aware of any objections or concerns to this request. So we think it's very reasonable and in line with the characteristics of that neighborhood, and supportive of the neighbors means a lot. So we support this request with these hours of operation. And yes.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anybody here in opposition to the application for 50 Bogart Street? All right, sir, we'll get to you in just a minute. We'll get to the opposition after we give the applicants a chance to speak. Thank you, sir. So do we have the owner or applicant here?
George Cook, applicant.
All right, Mr. Cook, sounds like you've got somebody to speak again, so would you like to say anything else?
I have nothing much to add. Just to clarify, it was an art gallery, Mr. Batchelder, and then it is currently a recently vacated interior design studio. The new business, Philosophers and Fools, will be a bookstore bar, emphasis on bookstore. Bar secondary, a place to post up and have some wine while you read, or host a book club, or possibly a book reading for the.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cook. Anybody else here in support of the application? All right, sir, please come on up and state your name and tell me how you feel about this proposal here.
Marcus McDonald, 63B Ash Street. I live on top of the corner store, a couple blocks away. Fortunately, I was like, been double meeting that wasn't able to catch your presentation. So, my main concern was parking, as somebody was saying before. I do live on, again, like a block away, and parking is horrible, as it is in this whole neighborhood. So I understand. I love the Elliottville Mini Bar. It's closed. I was trying to do it earlier. I'm going to chase and save. But, yeah, I know what I'm saying, especially like trying to get back home. It's literally like I have to drive like 3 blocks to like even find a parking spot. So I just would like to get that address, and also mention other different entities and businesses around. I just would hope. I'm not like in strong opposition. I don't know you. I like to know more about the proposal, but I think having a open community, something that everybody can go to, is something that community needs, and sounds like that's something that you're addressing. So that is like my, I guess, what's the word, concession or something that I think would be good about it. So I'm looking forward to the email and hoping that, yeah, we can just address those main issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. So anybody else here in opposition to the application? All right, Mr. Cook, would you like to respond to any of those concerns?
Sure, this is Michael and Jeannie, by the way, the business owners. I'm sure they'd be happy to tell you more about it. There's one off-street parking space available. They will be the sole staffers of the business, so that will be no staffing will be on the street. Their hope is that it is truly community business and catering to walkers and bikers. They have reached out to several leasable parking spaces in the vicinity. I believe the majority of those had peak demand conflicts, so they were not an option. The one that had spaces required parking registration, so obviously not feasible for patron parking.
Lee, remind me, you said this is a corner store. Is this operating as a corner store currently? Is it open as a corner store?
Well, it's, I guess it's an art gallery or.
It's currently a interior design. It was art gallery and then interior design.
Studying interior design, so it's, yeah, it was more of an office.
Okay, so now it functions more like an office use.
Although it's vacant, right? So it's
As of recent. Yes, sir.
All right, and so the use variances, I think I know because I read it every meeting. I think it's the one that requires the supermajority vote.
That's correct.
So we'll need 2/3 of the voting members to approve. Discussion, questions, comments, thoughts. Big name for Lee, questions for the applicant or the.
So Lee, the bar, cafe, that means you can go in, you can sit down, you can buy, and it operates like a tavern, as opposed to a corner store where you buy and leave. Correct?
Right, corner store could be a retail use where you have to buy and take whatever you buy off-site to consume it, to drink it.
Is that what we're doing here?
No, well, this is a combination of an on-site restaurant cafe use that can serve alcohol, wine and beer, and a retail use. So the floor plan shows the eating and drinking area up here, and then the retail space here. And this, I guess that's a light pink color. And if you are to approve this, then in my opinion, it would be approving what's shown on these plans. So this retail space can become more eating and drinking space. You could certainly add conditions to clarify that, just to make that an emphasis, point of emphasis. Approval on, but I think that's important.
Because right now it doesn't show a kitchen or anything for preparation of food.
Right.
Under
Perhaps
this,
the applicants might want to speak to that aspect of the cafe shows too, because that, once you go to that level and you have a kitchen, then it's a totally different thing, and there's more of the stuff that generates and pickups, deliveries and things like that, which can create its own headache, so.
Yeah, no commercial kitchen component here, like fare, charcuterie boards. Maybe a penny less at most, but no fryers, no ranges.
Where would that be prepared? Where would you prepare that?
That would be on the back bar. There's a sandwich refrigerator there with a prep table.
Leon, when you say retail cafe, if they sell the business, could somebody under cafe do something else?
Well, if you were to approve this with conditions that restrict it to what they're proposing, then no. I think that would be good to do to keep it from becoming something else.
I think that would help with the thought of too many car trips. If you start having to sit down, eat in a restaurant, and you clearly increase the car traffic to, a car per table.
Right.
Do they have to have some food with the, to be able to sit down and drink? Do they have to have?
You
certain-
don't have to have
any
food service to have wine and beer.
What's the
Beer if you have
requirement on,
liquor, but then that's a totally different thing.
is there a requirement on entertainment necessary? As far as music, noise, any of that?
They don't really address that, but again, if you wanna add some sort of restriction there.
I want to jump ahead if we're still talking about it, but I'm comfortable with making a motion for approval with the requirement that it not have a commercial kitchen for the preparation of meals.
All right, Mr. McKay has made the motion to approve with the condition that they will not operate a commercial kitchen for the preparation of meals. Is there a second?
Could I just ask one question?
Yeah, we can discuss it unless you like.
Was there gonna be a requirement as to the amount of retail space versus the amount of cafe space, or that wasn't
Is
what we were
that something
talking
that we
about?
can define, Lee, according to the
I thought
plans?
that's what Lee was
Well, you
suggesting.
just note what's shown here. if
What's
you
shown
want.
here is what we're agreeing
Note
to,
as shown on this approved plans.
All right.
and then that makes sense.
And then regarding what your question about the music, should we make the stipulation that there's no amplified music? I mean, is that what?
That's where I was going with it, yes.
Yeah.
If we, and I do have a question about the parking. So 7 was approved with the art gallery or with the?
Right, so the 2 apartments upstairs require 4 spaces, and then the office or gallery use of the ground floor required 4 additional spaces. And 1 space is provided on site, so they needed a special exception for 7 spaces to not provide the 7 spaces. So that's what was approved before.
Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the time that we've put in a condition relating to amplified music, it relates to live music, is that right?
That has been included. Right.
Right, and so do you all intend to have live music at this establishment? No live music, so you'd be okay with the condition of no live music? That would solve that issue. So, Mr. McKay, are you amenable to amending your motion to approve move to approve with the 3 conditions of number 1, no commercial kitchen, number 2, no greater than 400 square feet of eating and drinking space, and number 3, no live music.
Wasn't there another one?
If there was,
Well, I think you inverted the logic, which was great to sit there and say no bar area more than 400, because we were thinking about where we were accepting that drawing as the identifying the area for the back
yeah,
space.
and
It's in here.
so it's 392. So I'll give them the extra 8 square feet.
In case somebody moves a bench over, yeah. I accept your amendment. I accept your friendly amendment to that idea.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
I'll second the motion. I'll note, I think it'd be hard pressed to fit 24 seats and 400 square feet, but that could be mistaken.
All right, so we've got a motion with the 3 conditions. We've got a second, and any further discussion? If no, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes, and yes.
Can I get one clarification on
Yes.
that? If for whatever reason the bar area shrinks as we develop plans, no issue with that. We're just saying it's a
Correct.
max.
Correct. No greater than 400 square feet. Good? All right. So your use variance is granted and all of the other things that you've requested are granted. You've got the operating business hours here. You do have the three conditions that we all stated on the record. We know and understand. It'll be in the written order. Number one, well, I guess in no particular order, no live music, no greater than 400 square feet of restaurant area, no commercial kitchen. Okay.
400 square feet of bar area.
400 square feet of bar area. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, refusal next.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, we'll take a breath. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is V12, 1452 Salisbury Street, Ashley Hall Manor, PMS number 352-14-00-175, zoned SR1, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow an 8-foot fence along the rear property line and small sections of the sides of the property line, 6-foot height limitation. The owner is Justin E. Stokes. The applicant is Robert L. Eubanks, representative. Mr. Batchelder.
This property in Ashley Hall Manor is a residential property that backs up to Orange Grove Road, as you see here. And it's also has a side street adjacent to it. So it's bounded by streets on 3 sides. And the request is to build a fence taller than 6 feet in the back and a portion of the sides. So this plan shows the type of fence that they would build, this board on board fence. And then in the front sections where they would only request a 5-foot fence, they don't need a variance for that, but they would build a living fence similar to this. And they have images on the right showing their property in relation to the Orange Grove Road. And this image shows with the green highlighted portion, the portion of the fence that would be 8 feet tall. So this is the side street, First Street, and then Orange Grove is back here. So they're requesting this to mitigate the impacts from Orange Grove Road right there. And I included this view. This is the Google Street image from Orange Grove Road, just showing the property line. I guess the existing fence must sit on the property line, which is right behind the power line and the guy wires support that. And so that's the location of where they would build an 8-foot fence. I did notice that this residential property over here, which has a similar condition backing up to Orange Grove Road, has a taller fence at the back as well. I don't remember if we ever granted a variance for it, but you can see it in the Google images. So it looks to be probably 2 feet taller than the 6-foot fence that surrounds the property. So that's the request, and I think it's a reasonable request given the location right there adjacent to Orange Grove. And the fence is far enough off Orange Grove, I don't think it would look unattractive at all in that location. So I think it's a reasonable request given the difficulty of having the dock backing up Orange Grove. I support the application.
All right, do we have anybody opposed to the application at 1452 Salisbury Street? All right, no one is here in opposition. Do we have the owner or the applicant? All right, sir, we will be voting on your application shortly. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
All right, That was fast. Mr. Goodwin, move to approve. Ms. Grass, I'll put you down as the second.
Yes.
Goodwin, Grass, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and you have your 8-foot fence, sir. Thank you. Okay. The last item on our agenda is B 74 Radcliffe Street, Radcliffe Borough, TMS number 460-12-03-068, zone DR1, requesting a special exception under section 54-501 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area 3,014 square feet, 4,000 square feet are required. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a total side setback of 13 feet and having a 47% lot occupancy. 15 feet, 35% limitation are required. The owner is John William Plyer Trust, applicants are Lucas and Rachel Ford. Mr. Batchelder.
So, vacant lot in Radcliffe Borough, and the zoning map shows its location in this block of Radcliffe Street. And you can see that it's a relatively narrow lot compared to the other lots on the street. And here's an aerial image of that lot, the surrounding houses. And more information. There was a house on this lot, and I'm trying to recall now that the applicant can speak to this. I don't remember exactly when it was demolished, but we had a photograph of the house that sat there. In fact, there it is. So in the lower left image, you see the house that sat there, and was torn down or burned down in 1980s. Yeah. So it's been vacant ever since. And the applicant has prepared a plan for constructing a single-family home on this lot. These are images of other homes in the area. And then here's the site plan of the proposed house. So we've got the special exception for a lot of insufficient size. And clearly this is a lot that is intended to have a home on it, once did. And so I think that it's a perfectly reasonable request to grant approval for. And then we have the variances to allow construction, a total side setback of 13 feet, and the lot occupancy of 47%. So what they're proposing is a very nice sized home on this lot, very appropriate sized footprint. But then they also want to have this one-story accessory structure in the back, which is perfectly reasonable. There's no space to store things without storing them outside unless you have some sort of building accommodate that. So that seems like a reasonable request. And the house, of course, has to be elevated to meet FEMA requirements. And they provide the two straight parking spaces. They're satisfying setback requirements except for total side setback requirement, which is required to be 15 feet, and they're providing 13 feet. And the lot occupancy ends up being 47% because it is smaller, and like I said, it's a narrower lot than the other lots on the street. So I think that's a reasonable request. Yeah. And this will have to go through the BAR and receive their approval. This is not by any means the final design. They're just providing an image of the massing of the house to illustrate what they're proposing to build here. And of course, the BAR will have their opportunity to weigh in on the design when they're prepared to submit that. So that is the request. You see the accessory building in the back. And that concludes the information. So we are not aware of any objections or concerns to this request. And feel like it's a reasonable request for constructing a new single-family home on this lot. So we recommend.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anyone here in opposition to the application for 74 Radcliffe Street? All right, do we have, are you all the owners or the applicants, or?
We're the architect and potential owner. We have it under contract right now, but it will be our house.
Okay, great. All right, anything you'd like to say to the board this evening?
Yeah, I think we have already went through the lot coverage discussion earlier today. That this is the DR1 zone. The setbacks, I think it's important to note that we are still conforming to the 9-foot, 8-foot minimum. It's just the combined that we're asking for variance for. We didn't speak to any of this both sides. West side said, no problem, can I still park here until start construction? Yes. Right side, we actually went over yesterday. I'm over a bit there. No problem at all.
Okay. Sir, anything to say about this application?
We did not discuss.
The neighborhood wasn't approached.
Neighborhood association has not been,
They do not approach the neighborhood association.
and does the neighborhood, so the neighborhood association has no position because it hasn't had an opportunity to review the applications.
That's correct.
Our meeting's next week.
All right, questions for Lee, questions for the applicant, questions, discussion. Mr. Ask, do you have the same concern that you had with the earlier?
No, I mean, I do, but my concern was because we had opposition from a neighbor
Right.
earlier. So that was my main concern as far as going before the neighborhood association. I mean, I'd prefer if all the applications went before neighborhood associations.
Will the BAR have an opportunity to hear the neighborhood association?
Yes, they will. Sure, please.
I think you guys will be ready tonight.
Okay, so what was the last meeting?
There's one next week,
Okay, what was the last one?
1 month ago.
Either way, it didn't work out. We got it under contract and we had to flip over an application. Like, it was already alluded to.
I could
Lee, please, yeah.
just briefly, if you eliminated, well, let's forget about the accessory building in the back. But if you were to not count that in terms of the total lot occupancy of the building, what would be the lot occupancy of the main house?
It would still be over.
It would still be over, but
The storage.
Try to do some quick math, we'd like to know.
If you have the size of the accessory unit, I could work it out for you.
It's 227 square feet.
So you're at 1416 now, so you take the 270 out. You're still at 39%.
39, so but it's substantially less. So my point is that they are much closer to the 35% threshold with the house. The storage shed, accessory building in the back, I mean, that's with these single houses, that's to be expected, I think. So you run into that situation where you're stuck with, you do 35% lot occupancy.
We also, I'll be allowed to speak, I'm sorry.
Please, go ahead.
We did note on the sidewalk maps, there was always an accessory structure there, a lot historically, and most of the neighborhoods have accessory structures and stuff.
And for what it's worth, if you take the current lot occupancy or building footprint and put it on a compliant lot, or a foot lot, it's 35. So it's the same size house.
I think the big difference is too, perhaps, is that this is primary. Secondary unit.
Right.
We can't do anything in that accessory structure because we don't want to raise it. So our use in that is limited to this.
It's not an accessory dwelling unit, nor can it ever qualify as such. Got it. All right, any other, go ahead. Move.
I was gonna be approved.
Great. All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Goodwin seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm going to just be consistent.
Yep, okay. Thank you, Ms. Grass. Ms. Grass opposes. The motion nevertheless passes, and the variance for, excuse me, the special exception for 74 Radcliffe Street is, and the variance are both granted. Thank you.
Still recording?
Thanks. You make a good point. Yeah.
I know.
Huge. It's tough.
It's
Yeah.
on in the,
Yeah, both those things.